It's 4 p.m. on Tuesday, November 11th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. We begin with the government's decision to stop underwater search operations for the still missing Sewol-ho ferry victims. It was an emotional Tuesday morning, especially for the bereaved families of those unaccounted for. Connie Kim has our top story.
The underwater search operations for missing victims of the Seoul ferry disaster has come to an end, despite 9 people still being unaccounted for. Oceans and Fisheries Minister Lee Ju-young announced Tuesday morning that the government made the decision upon the request of victims' families.
We are announcing that the underwater search operations that continued for more than 200 days are being stopped. I sincerely regret calling off the operations without recovering all those unaccounted for.
Minister Lee said that parts of the hull are collapsing and that dropping water temperatures are making operations difficult and dangerous for divers. He added there was little possibility of recovering additional victims. Measures aimed at preventing bodies from drifting out of the sunken ferry will also come to an end. The Emergency Management Headquarters in Chindo, the closest point of land to the accident site, will scale back operations and soon dissolve. Although underwater search operations have come to an end, victims' families are not giving up hope of finding their loved ones. They requested that the government fully review the options of raising the vessel, calling it a final means to finding the 9 who remain missing. Relatives also called on the government to keep them informed throughout the process. The minister said the Central Disaster Management Headquarters will decide on when to start raising the ferry from the seafloor after discussions with experts and relatives of the victims. That decision is likely to come after the Seoul ferry law takes effect. The law aims to uncover the causes of the disaster, which left more than 300 people dead. The last victim recovered from the vessel came late last month. Before that, no one had been found inside the sunken ferry since July. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
And the sentences for the captain of the Sewol-ho ferry and 14 other crew members are out. 68-year-old Lee Jun-suk received 36 years in prison for abandoning ship at the time of the deadly sinking. He was, however, acquitted of murder charges, meaning he avoids the death penalty, which prosecutors had pushed for. Lee's first mate was sentenced to 20 years behind bars on similar charges. Now, Tuesday's verdicts bring the 5-month trial to a close. Lee and 14 crew members were among the first to be rescued from the sinking vessel in April, while hundreds of teenage high school student passengers were left behind in their cabins as the ferry went down. And this just coming in, President Park Geun-hye and U.S. President Barack Obama held summit talks on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Beijing on this Tuesday. Korea's presidential office spokesperson Min Kyung-wook says the two leaders discussed a range of issues of interest for both sides, while an official who attended the summit said the two presidents spent a good amount of time engaged in useful discussions. It's likely that the discussions centered around the security situation on the Korean Peninsula and North Korean human rights, along with bilateral issues. We will bring you more details on the Korea-U.S. summit talks in our next newscast. And over in Beijing, where the 2014 APEC summit is taking place, President Park Geun-hye also endorsed China's vision to create a regional free trade bloc called the Free Trade Area of the Asia-Pacific. The so-called FTAAP is the 21-member APEC's ultimate goal. Speaking at a session on regional economic integration Tuesday, President Park said speeding up the liberalization of trade and investment in the Asia-Pacific would be the most effective innovative way to secure new momentum for regional growth. Now, she then proposed Seoul's initiative to reduce the gap of member nations' FTA negotiating capabilities. Now, the focus is on how President Park's support for the FTAAP, often compared to the U.S.-led Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, may or may not have an effect on security diplomacy in Northeast Asia. With the gate to the world's largest consumer market set to be opened, Korea's service industries are gearing up to seize the moment. Following the announcement of the Korea-China Free Trade Pact on Monday, local banks are also getting ready for more yuan-based transactions. Song Ji-sun has this story.
Korea's service industries that will gain access to China's 1.4 billion consumers range from travel and leisure to finance and distribution sectors. The free trade deal also allows Korean law firms to set up joint ventures with their Chinese counterparts in Shanghai's free trade zone, while Korean entertainment companies can hold stakes of up to 49% of Chinese entities. Beijing, which has pledged to ease regulations to allow Korean participation in building up China's public telecommunications networks, will explore ways to expand service sector cooperation between the two nations.
We will have more opportunities to gain greater access to the service sector, as follow-up negotiations will take place over the next 2 years, after the free trade deal takes effect.
Korean banks are also preparing for the increased need to settle bilateral trade in their own currencies. Seoul and Beijing have earlier agreed to open a direct yuan trading market in the Korean capital next month. The Chinese currency now accounts for a mere 1.2% of payments made to settle two-way trade that totaled $228 billion last year. The Korean government's goal is to raise that portion of yuan-based settlement to 20% next year. In the coming month, local banks will also launch savings plans in the Chinese yuan with an annual interest rate of 3%, nearly double the interest paid for local currency-based savings accounts. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
Now, even without the Free Trade Pact, China is already Korea's #1 exporter, and major conglomerates have enjoyed seeing their sales jump in Beijing. But this heavy reliance has economists in Seoul warning that companies need to have a plan B in case things suddenly change in China. Kim Ji-yeon tells us more.
Korea's reliance on China for growth is expected to increase with the bilateral free trade agreement reached between the two countries. As China is currently Korea's #1 export destination, taking up more than a quarter of Korea's exports, little wonder Korea's top 200 conglomerates have been active in China. Between 2011 and 2013, their combined sales in China jumped 35% to more than $133 billion. Samsung Electronics seems to have benefited the most from Korea's trade relationship with China. The firm's sales spiked 74% from 2011 to $210 billion in 2013. The proportion of Samsung Electronics sales to China also increased by around 4 percentage points to nearly 18% of its total sales during the same period. China's population of 1.4 billion may be a cash cow for now, but some analysts are skeptical Korean companies can cope with the ever-changing currents in China.
If demand wanes, Korea's exports to China will drop fast. China is currently recording growth in the 7% range, but we don't know what's going to happen over the next 10 or 20 years. Neither do we know whether Korean exporters can deal with the vast structural reforms underway within the Chinese economy.
The economist says Korean exporters need to focus more on premium high-end products as well as consumer goods in order to tap into China's high-end market, such as food, cosmetics, and home appliances, rather than on lower-end goods. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
And speaking of those items, it first started with clothes, then on to cosmetics, and now it's spreading to food products. An increasing number of consumers overseas are buying Korean goods online. Our Shin Se-min reports on this trend.
November 11th is celebrated as Pepero Day in Korea, as the pepero snack resembles the ones in the date. Used as a marketing tool by the manufacturer Lotte Confectionery, the sales of the pepero sticks fly off the shelves once early November rolls around each year, and the popularity has expanded to other countries. According to online retail shopping mall G-Market, sales of pepero have topped the list of processed food products over the past month in its global shop. But the growth expands far beyond pepero. Last month, the total sales of Korean processed food surged over 160% on month. The G-Market Global Shop, which reported a 57% sales jump in the first 10 months of this year, offers food items ranging from chocolate and instant noodles to seasoned liver, red chili paste, and even fermented seafood.
I regularly purchase salt fermented seafood online. It was a little difficult to get my hands on it, but now it only takes 3 to 5 days to get when I buy it online.
Online retail shopping malls are boosting services to accelerate the market. Malltail, a direct purchasing website, recently partnered up with the Korea Postal Service, making shipping easier for a number of products, even fresh produce.
Considering that the majority of the shopping exports are being made to China and the level of their spending on Korean products, whether it be cosmetics or pepero, the sales will most likely surge. If their interest in Korean food products continues, it will definitely influence Korea's food industry.
And since Korea and China have concluded FTA negotiations on a deal that will remove tariffs on most products, more Chinese customers are expected to log into Korean online retailers to fill up their shopping carts. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
The momentum of Korea's economic recovery is not proving strong enough to offset the downside risks. That's how the Finance Ministry assesses the situation in its monthly report. It says job creation and employment rates are expanding, but the pace of recovery is sluggish because of low inflation and a drop in consumer prices over the past 2 months. Now, the government also cited risks stemming from overseas, including the weak Japanese yen, deflation woes in the Eurozone, and the U.S. Fed's recent decision to end its quantitative easing. The report comes ahead of the Bank of Korea's monthly monetary meeting slated for Thursday. The central bank is widely expected to keep its interest rate frozen at 2% after cutting it by 25 basis points last month.
Bringing you the fresh updates from stories breaking in Korea and abroad. We give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
Nearly 50 students were killed and more than 75 others injured in yet another school bomb attack in Nigeria. This one is shaping up to be one of the bloodiest school attacks to date. Son Jung-in reports.
The blast that tore through an assembly hall at the Government Science Secondary School in Nigeria's northeastern town of Potiskum was the 7th attack this year on a school in the country. Police say a suicide bomber who was disguised as a student set off the explosion just outside the principal's office, where students had gathered for a daily speech. Dozens were killed, all believed to be between the ages of 11 and 20. In a statement, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon strongly condemned the deadly attack and called for the perpetrators to be brought to justice.
The Secretary General is outraged by the frequency and brutality of attacks against educational institutions in the north of the country, and reiterates his demand for an immediate cessation to these abominable crimes.
Although no one immediately claimed responsibility for the attack, Boko Haram militants are suspected. The extremist group has targeted schools in its 5-year insurrection that aims to build an Islamic state in which boys receive only Islamic education and girls do not attend school. In reaction to the latest bombing, local authorities ordered the immediate closure of all public schools near the town and called on the central government to help bring an end to the escalating violence. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
The U.S. Central Command says it launched a barrage of airstrikes against the Islamic State group over the weekend, 23 in Syria and 18 in Iraq. It said 13 were targeted near Syria's border town of Kobani, while in Iraq, 7 strikes hit the northern city of Baiji, where Iraqi military forces try to regain control of the country's largest oil refinery on Sunday. Now, meanwhile, U.S. officials maintained they did not have information to confirm local reports that the Islamic State group's leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, had been wounded from coalition airstrikes over the weekend. And back here in the nation, the U.S. Special Envoy on North Korean human rights, Robert King, arrived in Seoul earlier today. He is expected to further pressure Pyongyang on its human rights violations, together with the UN Special Rapporteur on North Korea. Hwang Sung-hee has this report.
Washington's Special Envoy on North Korean human rights issues, Robert King, arrived in Seoul Tuesday amid growing international attention on Pyongyang's dire human rights situation. During his 3-day stay, King will meet with South Korean officials and attend a human rights forum. His trip coincides with a visit to Seoul by the UN Special Rapporteur on North Korea, Marzuki Darusman, and is largely focused on the ongoing UN moves to take the North Korean regime to the International Criminal Court on allegations of human rights violations. A draft resolution is expected to be adopted by the General Assembly's Third Committee as early as next week. It should then be officially approved by the UN General Assembly in December. And North Korea seems to have wrapped up its rare diplomatic charm offensive. In a statement given to UN member states last month, Pyongyang said that as of October 31st, it was suspending all talks on the draft resolution that urges the Security Council to consider sending North Korea to the ICC. The statement also warned those supporting the move will have to take full responsibility for the consequences that follow. Nonetheless, diplomats working with North Korean officials say the regime has become genuinely concerned about the recent UN moves, zooming in on its human rights situation. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Well, North Korea needs to show sincerity about denuclearization if it wants to improve ties with Washington. Now, those are the words of U.S. President Barack Obama speaking at a news conference at the APEC summit in Beijing. He said the release of 2 American detainees over the weekend was just a small gesture and that more needs to be done by Pyongyang, saying the North nuclear issue is the #1 security priority in the region. Obama stressed that the U.S. is open for talks, but only when North Korea is ready to seriously discuss giving up its nuclear ambitions. And shifting gears, it's emerged that a famous Korean singer, Lee Seung-chul, was denied entrance into Japan this past weekend. A number of reports say the refusal could have something to do with a concert he performed on Korea's easternmost Dokdo Island, which Tokyo continues to make territorial claims to. Park Ji-won has this next story.
The concert at the root of the controversy took place on Korea's Dokdo Island a day before Liberation Day in August. Lee Seung-chul was there to sing his new song that day with a choir made up of teenage North Korean defectors. Fast forward a few months, and the 47-year-old set off for a trip to Japan on November 9th. However, upon his arrival at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, the singer was detained for 4 hours at the airport's immigration office. Various media outlets report that when Lee was asked why he was being held, an official said it was due to recent media exposure, presumably in reference to his Dokdo concert. Lee was said to be furious about his treatment when he threatened to expose what had happened. Japanese officials said his entrance had been denied based on his past use of marijuana more than 20 years ago. Despite the immigration office's claim, Lee has entered Japan more than 15 times since his arrest for marijuana use in Korea in the early 1990s. He even held a concert in Japan in the 2000s. Following the incident, Lee canceled his schedule in Japan and is now taking a break in Korea. Lee's agency says the singer believes the retaliatory denial of entrance was due to his concert on Dokdo, which Japan falsely claims to be its territory. This is not the first time that a Korean star involved in a Dokdo-related campaign has been discriminated against in Japan. Korean star Song Il-guk, who participated in a swimming project to Dokdo in 2012, was warned that he might experience problems if he tries to enter Japan, and the drama Song acted in was pulled off from the airwaves in Japan 6 days before it was due to premiere. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
This time of the year, every year, Cheonggyecheon Stream in Seoul lights up with beautiful lanterns. Our Im Hyun-hee takes us to the scene, plus to a couple of gallery exhibitions you might want to pay a visit to this month. Take a look.
Every November since 2009, the streets of Seoul are lit up brilliantly by lanterns, creations of all different shapes and sizes, made by professional artists as well as by everyday citizens. The Seoul Lantern Festival brings a community together through a unique and dazzling blend of the traditional and modern, in an eye-catching display along Cheonggyecheon Stream in Seoul. Millions of spectators gather from all over the country and the world to see this landmark spectacle of handcrafted lanterns, each created under this year's theme of World Heritage Shining in Seoul, which highlights Seoul's history for friends and family alike. A deer in headlights. Hundreds and hundreds of headlights. Artist Choi Ram is known for melding technology and art for futuristic-like works, including this mammoth orb of car headlights that leaves viewers frozen in their tracks. It's part of a collection of works reflecting the dreams of 9 artists, with the exotic and the unknown mixed in with the world we live in. The exhibition is part of the Hyundai Motors Brilliant Art Project. And while some artists dream of a future world, some find creative inspiration in everyday items, like a handbag. Bag is Literature brings together 3 prize novelists and displays their unique interpretations of the literary world, stitched into the linings of a purse. Im Hyun-hee, ARIRANG News.
Hello, I'm Kim Bo-kyung with the latest weather forecast. We begin with some unwelcome news that find us readings are higher than normal levels in some regions. Now, readings are at 68 micrograms per cubic meter here in Seoul, which is gradually increasing. Also, taking a look at our satellite map, at the moment we are seeing cloudy skies nationwide and more clouds are set to move in, leading to showers in parts of Gyeonggi-do province later tonight. Other than that, other regions can expect typical late autumn conditions to continue throughout the day. And it looks like we may need our umbrellas tomorrow morning because about 5 millimeters of precipitation is forecast nationwide. Although it won't be much, the rainfall may be accompanied by stormy conditions and strong winds in the central regions. Looking ahead, tomorrow's rainfall will pull down numbers on Thursday, dropping to -2 degrees in the morning, which is Thursday, which is college entrance exam day here in Korea. On to the readings. Seoul and Gwangju peak at 15, Daegu 17, Busan 19. On to other regions. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon reaches 15, Jeju and Dokdo 16, Mount Kumgang hits 7. Those are the updates we're following at this hour. We leave you with the international weather.
And that's all we have for you now. More news coming up in 90 minutes time at 6 p.m. Korea time. See you then.